2. Welcome back to WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST. We're Baltimore positive. We got Senator Bill Ferguson here. We've been, we've like run overtime, Don. I mean, the Kerwin thing and the education. We want to talk to you about all of the city's issues.
We've got to have the senator back, but he clearly just gave us, and for those of you tuning in for the first time, I encourage you to go back to the previous 2 segments with Senator Bill Ferguson. He gave the clearest and most concise summary of the Kerwin Commission recommendations that we've heard. So please go back, check them out, and share them with your friends so that we can get people educated and have a real intelligent discussion about what Kerwin is. So, Senator, let me talk. You laid out the 5 cornerstones of Kerwin. We've got a price tag. I'm going to have you walk us through the price tag. But before we do, here's what Governor Hogan said just recently. They're at it again. The same politicians that raised your taxes 43 consecutive times during the O'Malley years have been meeting in secret. Now, I wasn't aware that anything. I wasn't understanding there was anything secret.
His own budget secretary was with us in these meetings.
Yeah, his budget secretary is there, so I'm not sure how secret it is. The so-called that's an interesting buzzword. Kerwin Commission goes on to push for I'll summarize it: massive and state tax hikes,
which is just a lie. Let me stop there.
Right,
a lie. That is a lie.
Okay.
And let's be very clear. The governor is lying when that is said.
And again, we invite, Nestor's been very clear, he'll reach out to the governor again. We'd love to have the governor on. So if folks say, how come you only have supporters of Kerwin? We'd love to have Governor Larry Hogan. Nestor will reach out again today. We'll give him equal time, and we'll be polite and courteous because we think it's an important discussion. So
if Ellen can sit with George Bush,
yes,
Larry Hogan can
sit with us, right. So then it talks about, these are the numbers.
That's all we're asking, actually.
These are the numbers that jumped off at me. A 39% increase, scaring people to death, 39% increase in the income tax, an 89% increase in the sales tax, a 535% increase in the property tax, costing Marylanders $6,200 a year. Well, the average Joe sitting out there goes, $6,200 a year. Kerwin may be fine, but we can't afford it. Tell us why none of that makes sense.
So let me give you an example of what
Tell
happened.
us what the governor did there.
So what the governor is doing is taking numbers that are about if we have full implementation of, we have met all of these goals, we've achieved every single metric in 10 years. In 10 years, the total cost will be around $3.8 billion above what we are spending today. That sounds like a lot of money, right? That sounds $3.8 billion.
Well,
over 10 years. Okay.
We have a $42 billion budget, right? Our $42 billion budget. We have a constitutional guarantee around education, and we are talking about $3.8 billion. Let's take that down to the child. What we are talking about at full implementation in 10 years is roughly $1,600 more per student per year. $1,600. That is fundamentally what we are talking about. And again, that is if we actually achieve it. So that would mean that we have 65% of our teachers are nationally board certified. It means that we have 80% of our kids who are getting college and career ready by the time they leave high school. If we are doing that, the benefits of that are astronomical. So let's say that. Here's the other fact. In 10 years, with inflation, with expected revenue growth, the expected revenue is roughly supposed to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 billion more than we receive. So if we take $3.5 billion out of $7 billion of expected revenue growth and put it towards education, guess what? We've paid for Kerwin. Done. Now, there are going to be pressures on other parts of the budget, and it is important that we deal with things around healthcare and environment and public safety and
you have
services.
school construction issues.
Constructions. So
you have Pimlico.
We have Pimlico, but all of that stuff can be done with existing resources and repurposing. I mean, I think, will we have to at some point talk about revenues if there's a fiscal cliff somewhere along the line? Potentially, but we have to do that every single year. We have a constitutional responsibility to balance the budget. We are one of only 9 states in the country over the last 30 years who has maintained a AAA bond rating because we take this stuff so seriously, even in the height of the Great Recession. So the real question I would say to the governor is, what is the cost of doing nothing? Because it's not
That's
zero.
What I'm going to add. That was exactly
zero.
where I was going. So we're not doing Kerwin. So what's your bright idea?
That's what I want him to answer. That's the only question.
When we haven't done anything in 20 years about this.
I think there's another. I think that's a key question. I want you to talk about. I'm going to make an assumption here, and if I'm wrong, say no, Don, not necessarily. I'm assuming that Senator Bill Ferguson is not going to vote for a 535% property tax increase.
Not. It is absolutely bogus to put that out there as a fear tactic. It is just mind-boggling that, I thought, what bothers me about this so much, let me just be totally transparent and honest, is we have a second-term Republican governor in a state that is largely Democratic and a General Assembly that has supermajorities in both chambers. There is an unbelievable moment. You want to look at past history? What is the number one state in the country for public education? Massachusetts. Why? In 1993, they were in a very similar place as us. They said, we're kind of getting our clock cleaned. We're falling down the ranks. We have got to fix this situation. And so what they did was they passed the Massachusetts Education Reform Act of 1993. It raised standards across the board. It really set out a new expectation for what they could achieve in their public school system.
Political courage.
If Massachusetts today were a country, it would be number 4 in the globe for the outcomes for reading and math for all kids. Why did they do it? Because they stuck to it. At that time in Massachusetts in 93, Democratic legislature, Republican governor. They came together, they sat around a table, they had hard conversations about what was important to get done, and that is what we need to do. And the governor has this unbelievable, this incredible opportunity as a Republican who is in contrast to the president to sit with the legislature, to sit with policymakers and say, what do we need to do to fix this crisis? How can we do this responsibly? How can we do it where it's affordable, where it is sustainable, where it is...
Why wouldn't he want his name with it? Why do you want to be politics. The anti-education governor? Why do you want... What benefit is there in that?
I mean, the only thing I can imagine is that, he's a second-term governor with a term limit. So the next step that he has is national. And to be relevant in the National Republican Party, you have to be against taxes. And so my sense is that this is all a political calculation for his national ambitions to be a player in the National Republican Party.
Sacrificing the children of your own state.
That's the only rational explanation that I can understand.
It does seem, and I know you've reacted, and you've been pretty strong about it. There are two things that appear to be happening out of the governor's office. One is this onslaught, obviously, of public opinion. Called it, I think, well-intentioned but half-baked.
Oh, it's so insulting.
And you've been at it for years. As you pointed out, he had representatives. His budget secretary.
His budget secretary has been there the entire time.
Has been on the commission.
The entire time.
And now there are reports.
And let me just say.
Go ahead.
The blueprint that we had, the framework that passed last year, passed out of the Senate unanimously, 45-0. Republicans, Democrats all agreed this is where we needed to go. Unanimous approval, Republicans and Democrats. And the governor has said, you know what? Up and spoke.
And then now there are reports, Senator, that the governor is actually gearing up to go down that rabbit hole of dark money to spend millions of dollars, which we know you can do by changing public opinion.
If
you have
today.
Millions of dollars of dark money, and tell folks who might not know, sometimes we get into the lingo, what do we mean by dark money?
Yeah, I mean, it means that there's a separate campaign committee can be set up that is essentially built as a nonprofit that has unlimited donations from unnamed donors. So somebody, an oil interest that is thinking maybe that the governor will be a part of the Chamber of Commerce one day, can write a $250,000 check into that campaign committee that can be used to basically spread misinformation. And that's what we're dealing with. And so, the governor has been raising money and expressly in emails to his chief funders and bundlers saying we have got to inform Marylanders who are ignorant of Kirwan. Even though 75% of Marylanders say education is probably the most important thing that we can do and understand the value of education for our future, you have to use misinformation to change that opinion.
Give me a timeline on this.
Right.
Right now.
That's a great question.
Yeah,
next steps.
This once-in-a-generation moment, we'll know whether or not we got there in the next 6 months. It will be by the end of this session in 2020, April 2020, we will know whether or not we've been able to create the political will to do this. We know what we need to do. We know how to do it. The question is whether or not we'll have the political will.
Well, walk us through the mechanics of that, Senator. And I know you've been gracious. You've stayed well beyond your time commitment. And we do need to have you back on. So many issues. But walk us through briefly before you get out of here the mechanics. Okay, we've got it. We got the recommendations. We got both sides dug in. We come back first week of January.
Well, not both sides dug in.
Okay.
The governor dug in. 45 senators, Republicans and Democrats, voted to move this thing forward.
Okay.
Because they got to go back to Dorchester,
yes, they understand.
They are, and
they're not term limited. They know that they've got to be investing in education to be able to be competitive.
Everybody moved to their county to put their kids to school, right? Everybody made that choice, right?
So give people a quick civics lesson then. It's back to how a bill becomes a law Saturday mornings. Tell us now what happens next in the General Assembly.
So we'll have a bill this year. It'll do two things. It will set out a formula that will be in law saying this is how we will fund things. Here are the accountability measures. If we don't see certain things, here are the things that don't get funded. Once that formula is part of the law, then we have a sense that we can start making the changes and hiring the right people and making the structural changes. But you need a formula so that there's predictability.
Does the formula identify funding sources?
It does not. So education is a general funded line item. So it is funded with our regular general funds that come in from the existing sales tax, the existing income tax. We have the Education Trust Fund for gaming, which has been increasing. Just last year, we identified another $100 million to put into the Education Trust Fund because of online sales, that because of the Supreme Court's Wayfair decision of out-of-state sellers. We said any revenues that come in above $100 million through this new Supreme Court case because of the sales tax applied to online out-of-state sellers, all of that money goes into the Education Trust Fund. That's going to already start to fund this stuff. It's going to start to expand pre-K.
So as we wrap it up, so your preference, and again, correct me if I'm not stating this because we want our folks out there to understand it. Your preference would be to pass the formula, say here's the formula, here's what we need to do, and then as part, which happens every year, of the budget process, have a discussion about how we balance. Make that point I've heard you make before about the state balancing its budget.
We are constitutionally required to balance the budget. We do it every single year. We're one of 9 states for the last 30 years. Only 9 have done this every single year. I believe, I sit on the budget committee. It is, people think you get to give out money on the budget committee. It's more saying no than saying yes. And so what we take very responsibly that we can only do things that we can afford to do. And so passing this formula means that we identify the revenue that makes this sustainable over time. We're not talking about throwing money at something next year. We're talking about a accountable system that invests in things that we know will work and making sure that we have improvements over time before more money goes in. That is the fundamental crux of what this blueprint is.
And you're pretty confident, and I want to close with this. You're pretty confident. You want to say to the taxpayers of Maryland that if anybody tells you your taxes are going up by more than $6,000 a year, that's simply not true.
I will say it 1,000 times over. That is a lie. That will not be the case. Absolutely not.
Nestor, we've gotten an education. We got to have the senator back. I want to say again, Nestor's going to call the governor. Governor, we really would love to have you come on Baltimore Positive, talk about Kerwin, so we can discuss this important issue. Man, we got to talk about the future of the city, Pimlico, so much more going on in the future of the Orioles. Come back.
Deal. Would love to.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Great way to start the morning.
Preakness hat for everybody. We're down here at Fadley's. Don Mueller, Senator Bill Ferguson. We have more Baltimore Positive ahead. We're going to be at Jennings. We're going to be at State Fair soon. Check out our whole schedule out at BaltimorePositive.com. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore sports and Baltimore Positive.